بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع هداه أما بعد. In the last session, we looked at the statement of Imam al-Jazari rahimahullah ta'ala around the affair of Noon al-Sakina and Tanween, and we discussed what was present within the chapter of Noon al-Sakina and Tanween. وحكم تنوين ونون يلقى إظهار إدغام وقلب إخفاء. He said, and the ruling of Tanween and Noon is yulfa, إظهار إدغام وقلب إخفاء. He mentions the ruling of Tanween and Noon that has sukoon upon it is either izhar, idgham, qalb or ikhfa. He mentions the four rulings of Tajweed, or the four rulings related to Tajweed of the Noon al-Sakina and the letter that comes after it, and that is izhar, idgham, qalb and ikhfa. فعند حرف الحلق أظهر وادغم في اللام والراء لا بغنة لزم. He said, with carry out what is known as al-idgham. Yani, that is, we make idgham in relation to the letters of the throat. Yani, those letters that originate in the throat. The letters that we had discussed previously, the 6 letters of the halq, the 6 letters of the throat. And he continues, فَعِنْدَ حَرْفِ الْحَلْقِ أَظْهِرْ. Make idhar with the letters of the halq, and make idgham في اللام والراء لا بغنة لازم, without gunna. So with lam and ra, make idgham without gunna. وادغمن بغنة في يؤمن, and make idgham with gunna with yumin. You remember yarmulun, and then we said that yumin are the 4 letters of yarmulun, and that they are recited with gunna. إلا بكلمة كدنيا عنوان. He said, except in one word, as we mentioned, you remember we said that if they occur, or if these letters manifest in one word, yani waw in one word, ya in one word, following noon as-sakina, that we do not have idgham. Like he mentions كدنيا وعنوان, like dunya and anwan. Dunya, of course, we discussed that we do not make idgham of the noon and the ya, or into the ya of dunya. Rather, the noon is pronounced clearly. We make idhar because of the fact that it falls within one word. And he mentions anwanu. Anwan is not a word that occurs within the Quran. And Ahl al-Ilm mentioned the reason that he mentioned anwan as an example is just an example of what should be done, and not the fact that this is a word that occurs within the Quran. And the only reason he did that was because of the fact that there was no examples that fell within the Quran that would likewise fall in line with the lines of poetry, that will fall in line with the format of the lines of poetry. And thus he mentions a word which he uses as an example, though it is not a word that is present within the Quran. He said, وَالْقَلْبُ عِنْدَ الْبَاءِ بِغُنَّةٍ كَذَا. He said, qalb is in relation to ba, and it is recited with gunna. That is, when we have noon as-sakina or tanween followed by ba, we have the hukum of qalb. We have gunna, and we have the letter, the noon turning into meme, and that is the meaning of this qalb, that we have a transformation, if you like, or turning of the noon to meme, min ba'di. And so he mentioned, وَالْقَلْبُ عِنْدَ الْبَاءِ بِغُنَّةٍ كَذَا. We still have gunna present, min ba'di, min ba'di. Then he mentions إخفى لدى باقي الحروف أخذا, on the basis of ikhfa with the rest of the huruf. And the issue that should be mentioned is that the qalb with noon as-sakina and tanween, qalb, is the same as ikhfa with mim as-sakina. Qalb with noon as-sakina is the same as ikhfa with mim as-sakina. And this is an important point to remember. So if you remember the fact that if we're looking here at the noon turning to meme, the noon becoming meme, Ahl al-Ilm discuss one of the reasons that noon becomes meme is because of the fact that the makhraj, we have the same makhraj, that they're present. Noon, afwan, the makharij are close, and thus meme, noon, these are letters that are close and are near in makhraj. And so when we have noon sakina that is followed by ba, when ba is in its origin, the makhraj of ba is the lips, and the makhraj of mim is the lips, it is easier to recite mim than to recite ba. Yani mim instead of noon is easier to recite than noon with ba. Yani mim with ba is easier to recite than noon with ba. And so instead of saying min ba'di, min ba'di, min ba'di, the Arab would say min ba'di, min ba'di, because min, its articulation requires a movement of the lips. Yani, it requires more than one movement of the lips. Min ba'di, min ba'di. We have a double closing of the mouth with min ba'di for the noon and for the ba. While with mim ba'di, it only requires one action. Mim to close, ba'di upon opening. And so it is far easier to recite mim ba'di than min ba'di because of the extra movement that has to be present when one does so. And thus the Arab would incline, as we mentioned, all of these rules revolve around ease in recitation. The Arab inclining towards ease would recite mim ba'di instead of min ba'di. And that is what we have here. And thus, when we look at iqlab, what is it that is present with iqlab? We have noon as-sakina followed by ba. Noon as-sakina followed by ba. That is iqlab as it relates to noon as-sakina. But think back to what we discussed in the ahkam of meme. In the ahkam of meme, we looked at al-ikhfa al-shafawi. Al-ikhfa under the ahkam of meme is that we have meme meeting ba. Meme meeting ba, which is known as al-ikhfa al-shafawi. And so with ikhfa al-shafawi, in essence, what we have with ikhfa al-shafawi is the same as what we have with iqlab. Why? Because with iqlab, the noon as-sakina is actually transformed into a meme. That meme meets ba. What was the ruling with meme in the ahkam of meme as-sakina? That al-ikhfa revolves around meme meeting ba. And thus, many of the qudama, the earlier qurra, the earlier reciters of the Quran, they would mention the fact that iqlab or qalb with noon as-sakina is the same as al-ikhfa with meme as-sakina. since the ruling is the same with qalb or iqlab, noon becomes meme. And thus we have meme meeting ba. That is exactly what we have with ikhfa. And so these two rulings are in essence the same. And so that in general was an overview of the affair of noon as-sakina, and tanween. We move on then, أيها الإخوة, to a very important bab, an important chapter, because of the fact that we have manifestations of this chapter throughout the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, and that is what is related, ikhwan, to al-mad wal-qasr. Al-mad wal-qasr. The affair of al-mad and al-qasr is what is related to elongation, that is, to the elongation of certain words, and al-qasr, that the letter or the recitation of a particular letter is left upon its origin. That is, it is left upon the normal elongation that is present within a particular word. And it is likewise a reference to the length of elongation that is given to a letter. And so here, mad is a study of the forms of elongation that are present throughout the Quran, and they are of varying types. Yani the mudud, or the varying different types of mad, is what this chapter revolves around, and it is what it looks at and what it discusses. So mad then is in essence linguistically a reference to a ziyada or tatwil. It is a reference to an increase and a extension of something. And as far as the technical definition, then it is italatu sawt biharfin min huruf al-mad. It is to extend the voice, that is to extend one's recitation, using a letter from the letters of mad, using a letter from the letters of elongation. You remember way back in the beginning of our sittings, we discussed the huruf of mad when we looked at the makhraj of the jawf. We said the jawf, which is the empty void from the mouth, the beginning of the mouth down to the throat. This empty void is the place of a number of letters. It is the place of 3 letters in total, and those 3 letters are the huruf al-mad. Those 3 letters are the huruf al-mad. And again, you'll remember the discussion that we had with the nasal cavity. Is that considered a makhraj or not for mim and noon? But that is a discussion that we have previously looked at. So here, what we're looking at here are the huruf al-mad, the letters of mad. The letters of mad, ikhwan, are 3. Alif, waw, and ya. Alif, waw, and ya. And these are letters that are used to elongate the recitation of something. Of course, they are relative to the 3 harakat. They are relative to fatha, kasra, and dhamma. Alif is relative to fatha. Waw is relative to dhamma. And ya is relative to kasra. The letters of mad, the huruf of mad, are letters that are added to another letter, and they extend the sound, and they are not uttered by themselves in isolation. They are added to a letter and its haraka in order to extend its sound. We likewise looked at the huruf of leen, and we said that leen is that we have a ya, but what precedes it is a letter with fatha upon it. And so, if it is preceded by a letter with fatha upon it, then it is considered a letter of lean. Likewise, waw is from the huruf al-lean. If waw has a sukoon upon it, preceded by a letter with fatha, then this is considered lean. Like qawl, mathalan, for example. And yawm, this is considered lean. Ya with the sukoon preceded by a letter with kasr with fatha is likewise lean. So lean revolves around these two letters, waw and ya, having fatha upon them and being having fatha upon the letter that precedes them and them having sukoon upon them. Qawm, qawl, yawm, quraish, layl. These are the huruf of al-lean. Of course, our discussion for the most part will revolve around al-mad. And so, when we're looking at mad, of course, it is important for us to be familiar with the fact that mad is of a number of types, and each type is broken down into categories. We have two main types of mad. We have mad that is known as maddun asli, mad that is referred to as maddun asli, and it is also referred to as mad al-tabi'i. Mad al-tabi'i, or natural mad, natural elongation. So maddun asli is the first category, also referred to as maddun tabi'i. The second category or type of mad is maddun far'i. That is, it is a subsidiary type of mad. And it is referred to as a subsidiary type of mad because it is caused by certain things. As far as mad tabi'i is concerned, then there is a difference between mad tabi'i and mad far'i. As we said with mad far'i, it is caused by certain things and it has a particular lengths. It is of varying lengths that we'll look at when we go through each of these categories. But with mad tabi'i or mad asli, then it is ordinarily aslan, it is mad biharakatayn. It is a mad, an elongation that has two haraka. An issue in relation to the haraka. In English, it is oftentimes called, or we hear, I remember, ikhwan, many years ago, many decades ago, hearing it being referred to as counts. And that is what we were taught when we were new to practicing and after embracing Islam, that they were referred to as counts. And we have ordinarily the fingers being used and employed in relation to these counts. So when it is said such and such, this is a mad of two haraka, in English we would ordinarily say 2 counts, or 3 counts, or 4 counts. And that, ikhwan, is an error that may cause a number of problems for the one who misunderstands these counts or what is intended by these counts. And then what is a count exactly? So the ustad would hold his hand up and begin counting fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Of course, those counts will differ and vary based upon the speed in which this individual is going to or chooses to count. Yeah, and he does so in a fast manner, in a slow manner. What exactly is a count? And the count itself will vary because of other factors. His ability to count. And he could have some actual ability in his hands, in his fingers. And there's some inability preventing him from counting in a set pace or in a set manner. It is possible that the individual, when he does so, he counts differently at different speeds with different people. He counts differently with the young person, a different count with an older person. Or that his counts vary depending upon the speed of his speech. And so there are varying factors, ikhwan, that affect exactly what a count is, how we consider that count, and how then bitali and effectively the mad is going to occur. And so what should be known, ikhwan, is that the haraka, when Ahl al-Ilm refer to haraka, the haraka, what is intended by way of it is the pronouncement of a letter with fatha, kasra or dhamma. Yani, if we were to look at lam, mim, noon, qaf, and then add a fatha, kasra or dhamma to it. One qaf with one dhamma is qa, or a lam with the dhamma is la, or a mim with a dhamma is ma. If we have, then this is one letter with one haraka. If we were to add a letter and we to add fatha, kasra or dhamma to that letter, then we have two haraka. If we were to add a third letter and add fatha, kasra or dhamma to that letter, then we have three harakat. And so these harakat, or what Ahl al-Ilm intend by way of these harakat, are the letters with one of the movements on them, fatha, kasra or dhamma. And one of the vowel sounds, fatha, kasra or dhamma. And so two harakat is the equivalent of two letters with two haraka upon them. That is what is intended by the harakat. And so, first and foremost, we look at that which is related to the harakat and what is intended by them. Secondly, we are going to, bi'idhnillah, take one by one each of the varying forms of mad and look at the varying categories that are underneath these forms of mad, and we're going to study them one by one. As we mentioned, there are two broad categories. Under these two broad categories, which the first of them being maddun asli or mad tabi'i, the natural mad, the second being maddun far'i or a subsidiary mad. Maddun tabi'i in its origin is extended for the duration of harakatayn. And so we're going to use haraka and we're not going to use counts. And if we do say count, then we intend and mean haraka, not the counting of fingers. And so if we were to move over to using count, it should be understood that what is intended by count is a haraka. Qa, qi, qu, ma, mi, mu, and so on. Now, so the origin then is that mad is of two main types, two broad categories. Maddun asli and maddun far'i. Maddun asli is referred to as mad at-tabi'i, and this is how you will hear many of the people of knowledge refer to mad tabi'i, either mad tabi'i or maddun asli, one of those two. Underneath mad tabi'i or mad asli, we have a number of categories that are referred to as the mulhaqat, or that which yulhaq and are annexed with maddun tabi'i or mad asli. Over with mad far'i, which is the mad that is a subsidiary form of mad, which is usually more than harakatain, more than two haraka. And there are varying categories of this type of mad. They are likewise mulhaqat, or they are similarly of categories of, or not mulhaqat, but categories. So in relation to mad tabi'i, we have mad tabi'i and we have ma yulhaqu bihi. The mulhaqat of mad tabi'i, the things that are annexed and are considered under the category of mad tabi'i, and there are three categories: maddun badal, maddul iwad, and mad as-silatu as-sughra. Mad again, maddul badal, maddul iwad, and maddul silatu as-sughra. These are the categories that fall under mad tabi'i. If we move over to mad far'i, mad far'i. Mad far'i is categorized into two categories again. The categories underneath mad far'i are of two types. There are two categories of mad far'i. We have the first category that is caused by Hamza. And so underneath that which is caused by Hamza, we have a number of forms of mad. The second category, that which is caused by sukoon. That which is caused by sukoon. Again, under mad far'i, we have two categories. The first category, that which is caused by Hamza. The second, that which is caused due to sukoon. And so, if you could imagine a tree, the tree-type graph. At the top, we have mad or al-mudud, the elongations. From that word, we have two forks. The one, maddun asli. The second, maddun far'i. In brackets, we could write next to asli, tabi'i or natural mad. That is one group. Over in mad far'i or the subsidiary forms of mad, that again has two forks. One, mad or elongation caused by Hamza or elongation due to Hamza. The second fork, elongation due to sukoon. Under the elongation due to Hamza, we have al-maddul muttasil. And when we discuss and look at them, we'll look at one by one the names, the meaning of the names, and why they're referred to as such. Al-maddul muttasil. We have al-madd al-munfasil. So muttasil, al-munfasil, and maddu silatul kubra. Maddu silatul kubra. That is under Hamza. Under sukoon, we have al-maddul lazim. We have al-madd al-aridu lis-sukoon. So the first, maddun lazim, mad al-arid lis-sukoon. And third, maddul lin. So these categories then, we're going to go over each and every one of these categories of mad. And these are the categories, ikhwan, that we need to be acquainted with. Any daris and any talib of Tajweed must be acquainted with these forms of mad, since they occur throughout the Quran and throughout one's recitation of the Quran, ikhwan. Virtually every surah, and perhaps there is not a page in the Quran except that there is some form of mad that is present upon it. There is not a page in the book of Allah Azza wa Jal except that there is some form of mad. And so what we're going to look at in these sittings is, number one, what is the intent behind these mudud, or how do they occur? We're going to look at the categories of these mudud, and we're going to look at the periods of time that are to be given to them. And perhaps in today's session, we'll round up with a discussion of that which is connected to the periods of time. As far as the periods of time are concerned, ikhwan, then we have 5 main periods of time. And what do we mean by 5 periods of time? We have 5 different durations of harakat. When we say this is extended for such and such harakah, then there are 5 different categories of these durations of time that are given to the elongation. We have The first category being referred to as al-qasr. Al-qasr. Al-qasr is a reference to mad that is given harakatain. Mad that is given two haraka. And that is like mad al-tabi'i مثلا. So that is the first category. The second category is that which is fuwayq al-qasr. It is above al-qasr, just above al-qasr, and it is 3 harakat. The third category, at-tawassut, which is the middle or the medium level of harakat and of mad, and that is 4 harakat. 4 harakat. The fourth level is fuwayq at-tawassut, is just above at-tawassut. Tawassut meaning something being medium or in the middle of something. Fuwayq at-tawassut, which is 5 harakat, 5 harakat, and then number 5 is the longest of all of them, and that is what is known as at-tul, and it is 6 harakat. And so these 5 levels of mad, we're going to see how all of them are and will be manifest bi-idhnillah in the categories of mad that we will look at. In the categories of mad, it should be likewise mentioned that these the lengths of each of these mudud is going to vary depending upon the type of recitation one is doing. A recitation, ikhwan, with the qurra and with the imams and the scholars of qira'ah is of 3 main types. We have what is known as at-tahqiq. We have what is known, secondly, as at-tadwir. And we have what is known, thirdly, as al-hadar. At-tahqiq is the slowest of the forms of recitation. And it is that the qari, he recites slowly. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ. And you'll hear it oftentimes, ikhwan, with some of the recordings that we have. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. That slower form of qira'ah. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. This slower form of qira'ah. And then we have at-tadwir. Tadwir is slightly faster. الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. And then we have al-hadar. الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. Slightly, well, it is the fastest of the 3 levels. And so, these 3 levels of qira'ah are levels of qira'ah that the mad and the mudud are going to be affected and going to change depending upon how one recites, whether it is tahqiq, whether it is tadwir, whether it is al-hadar. But it doesn't change except in relation to what is relative to the speed of the qira'ah. If one recites أولئك على هدى من ربهم, this now is going to be relative to tahqiq. If one is reciting hadar, أولئك على هدى من ربهم, it may be faster because of, and it's going to be faster, and the mad is apparently going to be shorter, but it is not in actuality shorter, because the harakat are relative to the speed. And so the harakat are going to change based upon the speed, which is the importance of understanding that it is harakat. Because if we're working with this counting fingers, then again, how do we count fingers in relation to these three different speeds of qira'ah? But with the harakat, of course, one is reciting based upon harakat. His recitation revolves around harakat regardless of the speed. And so if he's reciting tahqiq, then the harakat are part of his recitation. Therefore, the mudud and the elongation will be relative to his speed. If he's reciting tadwir, likewise. If he's reciting with hadar, likewise. And so these harakat, ikhwan, are going to be relative to the speed of the qira'ah. If we look first and foremost then at the mad al-tabi'i and that which is related to the elongation with mad al-tabi'i, as we mentioned, ikhwan, it is with mad al-tabi'i and the mulhaqat and those categories that are likened and annexed with mad tabi'i, what we have is the mad of harakatayn, a mad of harakatayn, يعني two harakat with this mad, and it is the mad, ikhwan, that many people don't even realize is a mad and an elongation because of them just being acquainted with reciting that word in that way. But actually, there is mad that is present upon it. There is mad that is present upon it. The first then is mad tabi'i. And mad tabi'i occurs, ikhwan, with certain words being written in certain ways and the presence of the huruf of mad being upon them. If we were to look, for example, at قالوا يا موسى قالوا يا موسى, here we have mad al-tabi'i in a number of places in this two-word construction. قالوا يا موسى قالوا يا موسى. Number one, we have قالوا. qa is qaf with a fatha upon it with one of the letters of mad, which is alif. And so we're not saying qalu, which is one haraka, rather we have the letter of mad upon it, connected to this qaf, and so we have qalu, we have a double length, qalu. With lu, we're not saying qalu, rather we're saying qalu. We're adding the waw to the lam. This waw is a letter of elongation, and so we say qalu. As natural as it sounds, these are two manifestations of mad tabi'i, and this is two harakat. Ya Musa, ya, again mad tabi'i. Ya in its origin is ya, but we have a alif upon it in the Quran. Though with Musa it is written with a small alif over the ya, and the ya is connected to the mim. But it is the same as the lam with qal. But this is just how it was written in the Mus'haf, and thus we have to this day the preservation of the manner in which these words were written. And we'll look at that as we come towards the end of Jazariyah, those words that are recited a particular way, but in the Quran it is written like that because that is how it was in the Mus'haf al-Uthmani. Now, and so قالوا يا موسى, again mu, we have another form of elongation, mad tabi'i. Mu in its origin, if we were to remove the letter and the harf of mad, and we remove the letter of elongation, it is mu. But we have waw added to the mu, and so we now have elongation. It now becomes mu instead of mu. قالوا يا موسى يا موسى. Sa again is another example. Mad tabi'i. Sa is in actuality sa, with a ya of elongation at the end of it. And so it becomes sa instead of sa. And so if we were to remove all of those letters of elongation, what would we have? Qalu ya Musa. Qalu ya Musa, afwan. Qalu ya Musa. Qalu ya Musa. But on the basis of the presence of these letters of elongation, what do we have? Qalu ya Musa. When one recites these letters that have these natural mad tabi'i upon them, the only thing that we give them is harakatayn. We do not exaggerate the mad. Qalu ya la. Here we've given more than the haqq that is to be given to those letters. Harakatayn faqat. Qalu ya Musa. قالوا يا موسى حركتين وبس. And that, ikhwan, is the origin with all mad tabi'i. It is extended for harakatayn. What is annexed with mad tabi'i are three forms of mad. The first of them is mad al-badal. Mad al-badal. Mad al-badal is a mad that revolves in essence around Hamza. And that is, we have a letter that is followed by a Hamza. Now that letter that is followed by a Hamza is ordinary in this instance with Maddul Badal. It is in origin a Hamza itself. And so we have a Hamza that is followed by another Hamza. Whenever we have a Hamza that has a haraka upon it, followed by a Hamza with sukoon upon it, we do not recite the two Hamza together. And that was not done by the Arab. Rather, the second Hamza becomes a letter of mad. And this is likewise connected, ikhwan, to the science of sarf or morphology in the Arabic language, in the study of the Arabic language. Yani this badal or this exchange of a letter here is something that it doesn't only occur in the Quran, but in the Arabic language generally. And so if you were to look, for example, at utu in its origin is utu. Yani we have a Hamza with a dhamma upon it, then a waw with a Hamza upon it, with a sukoon upon that. And so it is in its origin utu. Iman, for example, Iman is a similar example, a similar scenario. Iman in its origin is, and we have the asl of Hamza, which has a kasra upon it, that is followed by another Hamza, which has a sukoon upon it. And so Iman in its origin is I'man. I'man. Of course, these letters are difficult to recite. Yani, in that manner, if that were the case, yani, these would be difficult to recite. Similarly, Amanu is a Hamza followed by another Hamza with sukoon over it. That is the origin of the word. If one breaks down, yani, breaks the word down to its root forms. And so Amanu is in its origin A'manu. A'manu. If we were to look mathalan at Quran. Quran in its origin, and if we break the word down to its root form and then look at this format, then it would ordinarily have been Qur'an. Qur'an. We have an, yani now it becomes an, but we have a Hamza, and then it is followed by another Hamza with sukoon. مثلا جاءوا. It is in actuality جاءوا. جاءوا. And so we have a hamza followed by a hamza with sukoon. So instead of reciting a, u, I, the second hamza, what occurs with it? Badal is made with it. Badal meaning a substitute or an exchange. And so we have a badal that takes place, and that is that the second hamza is exchanged for one of the letters of mad, depending upon that which was present upon the letter that was before it. Yani, that which was present upon the hamza, the first hamza, is what dictates what the second letter will be. That letter that was originally a second hamza. Yani, with sukoon upon it. And so, of course, a'manu, because the hamza itself has a fatha, what is the letter that is relative to fatha? Alif. So instead of a'manu, it becomes amanu. Instead of u'tu, it becomes, since we have the first hamza having a dhamma upon it, so what should be relative to it is that it is followed with a waw. Utu. Iman. Iman becomes iman. Qur'an. Qur'an becomes Qur'an. Yura'un becomes yura'un. Ja'u becomes ja'u. And so this waw, ya, and alif, iman, after being i'man, is a form of elongation that has occurred as an exchange for the difficulty that is present with two hamzas coming together, one of them having a haraka and the second having a sukoon upon it. Khati'in. Khati'in becomes khati'in. Khati'in. Al-khati'in. And thus this form of mad is the same as mad at-tabi'i in that it is given two haraka. It is recited with two haraka, just as mad tabi'i is given two haraka. قالوا يا موسى حركتين فقط. آمنوا أوتوا إيمانا القرآن يراءون خاطئين جاءوا حركتين فقط. انتبه إخوان, pay attention to يراءون, because يراءون, we have two forms of mad here. The only thing that we're concentrating on with يراءون is the second un, yani the hamza followed by waw. And so this mad badal is similar in duration to mad at-tabi'i. It is present because of the exchange of one letter for another, and that is the exchange of a hamza for one of the letters of elongation, and it is only given harakatain. The second form of mad that falls under mad at-tabi'i is mad al-iwad. Mad al-iwad, iwad, ikhwan, in essence is similar to badal in meaning. Badal is used, and the reason it is used in the science of Tajweed is because it is likewise used in the science of sarf, in the science of morphology, yani in the language where the origin of this affair comes from. And therefore, when it is used in the science of sarf and in the science of the language, yani in order to make it easy to remember the cause of this badal, the cause of the exchange, the same term is used, badal. Iwad is similarly a reference to something being exchanged or something representing something else. If one makes iwad of something, then it is exchanged for something else. As the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned, "Man taraka shay'an lillahi awadahu Allahu khayran min." And it is from the same origin. This ta'weed then is that something is exchanged for something else. As the Prophet mentioned in this hadith, whoever leaves something for the sake of Allah, awadahu Allahu khayran min, Allah Azza wa Jal gives him something better than it. Yani in exchange and in its place. So, Maddul Iwad is a reference to this exchange or this affair of something being given or put in the place of something else. And what it refers to here and in our study here is the tanween and nasb. And what is intended by tanween and nasb is the tanween that occurs on the basis of fathatain. If we just simplify it, two fatha. The tanween, yani that is based upon fatha. The tanween that is based upon fatha, which occurs because a word is mansoob for a reason, yani it has been affected by something prior to it in the sentence. Ordinarily prior to it, though, we sometimes have ta'khir and taqdeem in relation to the mansoobat. Sometimes something can be mansoob, have fatha upon it, and be affected by something that comes after it, that does occur in some instances in the language. But ordinarily, when something has fatha upon it, as far as sentence construction is concerned, it is because it is affected by some amil or something within the sentence prior to it that causes it to have fatha. And we're not going to get into nahu, ikhwan, but we're trying to keep it as simple as possible. Just bear in mind and remember, whenever we have a letter that has fathatain upon it, and we're stopping upon that fathatain, then the fathatain, there is now iwad that takes place. And that is, when we're stopping upon that letter that has fathatain, then the fathatain becomes alif. That fathatain becomes alif. And so, Inna Allah kana aliman hakima. Hakima. Here, the origin is aliman hakiman. That is the asl. But here we have mad al-iwad. And so the tanween aliman hakiman now is exchanged for an alif after the meme. So it is now recited, Inna Allah kana aliman hakima. Hakima. This ma is the duration of it is harakatain. Two harakat. And it is on the basis of the presence of tanween that we're tanween based upon fathatain that we're stopping upon. It now becomes alif. مثلا فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا. فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. بعبادة ربه أحدا. In its origin, أحدا. أحدا. But here we have an example of mad al-iwad. Fathatan, that we're going to stop upon, now becomes ahada. It now becomes, instead of ahadan, it now becomes ahada. Ma'an, if we're stopping upon it, ma'a, it now takes on the alif instead of the fathatain, instead of the tanween. Du'a, du'a, instead of du'aan. And so this third type of badal, which falls under the category of badal al-iwad, is based upon this exchange that occurs between or with fathatain when one stops upon the fathatain. The third type of mad that falls under mad al-tabi'i, in that it has harakatain, is mad al-sila. Mad al-sila is the mad, again it is referred to as mad al-sila because of the fact that it revolves around, again, another linguistic nahu issue, and that is we have what is known as a dhamir, or a pronoun, that occurs in the Arabic language in order to link something to something else. We have a pronoun that is used to connect something to something else. And so the actual noun may have been used previously, but then in order to link the noun to another part of the sentence, a pronoun is used. A pronoun is used. And so if I was to say, Ja'a Muhammadun wa innahu laghadban, Muhammad came, and indeed he is ghadban. This this ha is a dhamir, and this dhamir, or it is a pronoun that is used to connect one part of the sentence to another. And so whenever we have a pronoun like ha, and the intent is ha in all of this discussion, ha, when it is used as a pronoun that connects one part or one noun that is present within a sentence, or a part of a sentence to another part, it is known as the sila. And it connects the mufrad al-ghaib al-mudhakkar, that is, it connects the mufrad, or an individual, an absent male party or individual participant within the jumla, within the sentence. It connects him and his previous mention to something that was present, or to something that comes later within the sentence. So this who, inna, who, it can either be a male, an absent male, or something that is masculine in form. And so this who, or this pronoun, whenever it is used, if it occurs between two letters, and remember the principle, ikhwan, if this ha occurs between two letters that have haraka, then the ha, whether it has waw upon it or ya upon it, then it is given elongation based upon what is present upon it. And so we have, again, to reiterate, the pronoun ha. This ha either has dhamma upon it or it has kasra upon it. And it falls between two letters that have harakat. That is, it falls between whether the two letters have fatha and kasra. One has dhamma, one has fatha. Regardless, both letters on both sides of that ha have harakat upon them. Then the letter itself receives elongation. The letter itself receives elongation. As long as the letter that comes after it is not hamzatul qata', and the discussion of hamzatul qata' will come later. It is a different form of mad. But any letter, as long as the letter that follows is not hamzatul qata', that is the the alif with the hamza on the top. As long as it is not that letter, any other letter with haraka and before the ha and after the ha, as long as the letter that comes after it is not hamzatul qat', then we have this mad silatun sughra. It is known as mad sila because of the fact that it relates to this ha, which is referred to as a sila, or something that connects one part of the sentence to another. And we do not have after it hamzatul qat', which would be a different type of mad sila, which is known as mad silatun kubra, which is going to come. This mad, the first mad silatun sughra, if it occurs, as long as those conditions are fulfilled, we have ha, it has dhamma or kasra upon it. That which comes after it is or after and before it are two letters that have haraka upon them. Then the ha itself is given mad of harakatain. And so مثلا إنه على رجعه لقادر. Again, giving emphasis to these two places. إنه على رجعه لقادر. Here are two examples of mad sila. Two ha, before both of them and after both of them are letters that have harakat. The letter that is after them is not hamzatul qat'. In this case we have mad silatun sughra, and we extend for harakatain. إنه على رجعه لقادر. إنه على رجعه لقادر. So إنه على رجعه لقادر. إنه على رجعه لقادر. And so there is no exaggeration needed. There is no extra emphasis to be given. إنه على رجعه. لا. إنه على رجعه لقادر. يكفي حركتين. ما له وما كسب. ماله وما كسب. عفوا. ماله وما كسب. ماله. So we do not say ماله. لا. ماله. We have some elongation upon it. حركتين. ماله وما كسب. Or like مثلا يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبي وأمه وأبي وأمه وأبي. So here we do not elongate it more than and give it more than its haq. وأمه وأبي, which is something, ikhwan, that you'll find particularly those who love to emphasize beautifying and beautification of the voice without observing these rules of tajweed, just resembling singers. Then these places, ikhwan, that should only be given a particular haqq are given overemphasis. Why? Because it sounds more musical. يوم يفر المرء من وأمه وأبي. Here, ikhwan, this is exaggeration in relation to mad. Here, what type of mad is it? We look at the letter, it is ha. We have before it a haraka. We have after it a haraka. The letter that is after it is not alif, not hamzatul qat'. Therefore, it is given mad harakatayn. Ummihi wa abi. Ummihi wa abi. Wa bas. And with that then, ikhwan, we look at mad generally, or we understand the affair of mad generally, and the first category of mad tabi'i, and the mulhaqat, or the categories that are likened to this form of mad. And we'll continue bi'idhnillah with maddun far'i into